Good afternoon. Welcome to the public safety meeting for Wednesday, February 26th. I'm Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, and I am joined today by my colleagues, Councilmember David Rue and Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell. We do have, for the regular agenda, we do have a couple of speakers for multiple items, and so I will call Ms. Antonia Ramirez. You have 2 minutes for your multiple item cards.
Thank you very much, ma'am. This grant money was stolen from the homeless individuals by Homeland Security. So fuck the FBI, the CIA, NSA, and Homeland Security, with the exception of ICE and Customs Border Patrol agents. We love and pray for them. They should be highly compensated. Number three, $56,236,000. That is excessive and outright theft. That grant money will be unlawfully used by the two matzo ball corrupted schmucks and shysters, Eric Garcetti and the city attorney Michael Feuer's personal slush fund coffers, and maybe pay out some outstanding lawsuits. And but we'll never see any of it used rightfully, and we'll never use for LA nor Long Beach urban terroristic gang epidemic areas, nor to combat the high crimes that engulf all of us, whether homeless or housed. 4, yes, we need to find and fund all the fire departments and all firefighters for their courage, sacrifice, valor, high stress tolerance, sleep deprivation, family hiatus, and air support pilots with their air tankers to assure that all their fire equipment is safe and secure and functional and well maintained. Moreover, we need firefighters to be healed and provided for in all areas of their existence. Their optimum performance to face those blazing infernos is crucial. God bless all firefighters and rest in peace to all the fallen firefighters. And number 5, stop rewarding all the criminal, violent drug addicts, felons, and predators. That means no money or settlement payouts to these criminal, undesirable Chango Latino wetbacks and gangbangers, nor the white trash junkies, nor Skid Row niggers and slave masters, or the homeless assholes. Let's put all the judges, attorneys, commissioners, the ACLU, and their families out on the streets with no cell phones and no police protection. And 6, no money donations to Rampart and West Los Angeles Police Department Nimrods. $40,000 to illegally pander to the community criminal predators. Hell no. Today's communities are now controlled and run by these elite satanic Zionist Jew drug cartels and their foot patrol soldiers. We will not use any money to pander, solicit, entice, and or broker with these criminals.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold Sachs for your multiple items. No, not now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Arnold Sachs. And I held items 8 and 9, and someone could handle them simultaneously. So one refers to the California Fire Code, and the other refers to wildland urban interface hazard mitigation, which could also be fires. We seem to be having a lot of devastating forest fires in LA and in California. And so I thought about something. I mentioned something about keeping the fire hydrants working, and that could create some problems, but maybe going old school, maybe in some of these new developments or in even in some of these old developments, some funding could be found to build water towers. You know, they used to have water towers in a lot of cities that would deliver drinking water, and they'd work by gravity, and whatever they did to fill them up. If they put water towers throughout some of the urban areas in California, some of these heavily forested areas, even if they put 3 or 4, they could hold 20,000 gallons. I don't know what they hold per se, but they could use recycled water or reclaimed water and fill the water towers up, and that could be a remedy to keep water in fire hydrants, so that when there's a forest fire, the trucks that come out there will be able to get water from the fire hydrants. Right now they need to be pumped through electricity. I think water towers work by gravity. Something that somebody could consider, maybe work with the county and some of the developments they're doing, and maybe help out throughout the state of California by using some water towers in some of these areas.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Colleagues, that will close our multiple item card, and we're going to hold general public comment for later in the meeting. At this time, I'd like to recommend taking items 1 through 8 on consent, if there's no objection. That'll be the order. And that'll bring us to item number 10, please.
Item 10, motion, Koretz, Harris, Dawson, Corcoran, relative to instructing the LAPD with the assistance of the CAO and Personnel Department to report on the LAPD's progress in hiring civilian employees. This matter has also been referred to the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee.
Go ahead, Vartan. Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Vartan Yegian. I'm the commanding officer of Personnel Group. I also have the Personnel Division under the Personnel Group, so I'm here to respond to some of your questions.
Thank you. And colleagues, just to, as you know, our civilian workforce is incredibly important for the Los Angeles Police Department. It's what has afforded us to put more of our sworn personnel back on patrol as a result of the restoration of a lot of those civilian positions, and this motion is relative to what vacancies still remain in the department and what work is being done to fill those current vacancies. So I'm not sure if you want to go ahead and delve into where we stand on some of the vacancies with the department.
Absolutely. So you had 5 questions. I'd like to go down the question number 1 and then answer all the questions as much as is possible. And then I'll answer any follow-up questions if you have them. So at this point, number 1 question is, how many vacancies, civilian vacancies, do we have in the department? We're funded to have 3,485 civilian personnel, of which 5 of them are council sub-authorities. At this time, we have 440 civilian vacancies, and we believe by the end of this fiscal year, we will be able to hire all the civilian personnel that we're planning to hire, and we'll end the year with 3,042 civilians.
I'm sorry, 3,000?
3,042 civilians. So we'll be carrying close to 440 vacancies by the end of fiscal year. So as far as the how long it takes to onboard and train our civilian workforce, we divided that into kind of 3 major groups for simplicity to comprehend the complex process of hiring civilians. So we divided them into administrative civilian classifications. We divided them into specialized, such as, for example, IT or mechanics or fingerprint specialists. And then we also divided the 3rd group into safety positions, public safety positions, even though they're not sworn, but they are civilian equivalent of public safety. So in average, it takes us, for the first 2 groups, for the administrative and for specialized civilian group, it takes about 45 to 70 days to hire someone into the department. That is in conjunction with working with personnel department when the list is available for us for hiring or promotional list is available. It takes about 45 to 70 days to onboard a civilian personnel into LAPD. As far as the safety positions are concerned, these are the PSRs or departments, detention officers or security officers mainly. It takes about 65 to 105 days because it requires more stringent background investigation, more training, and they go through mini academies, so to speak, training, and then also it requires longer time to develop the certification list. So the next question is number of civilians hired into the department over the previous couple years. So in 2017-18 budget year, we had 369 new hires, we had 285 attrition, and we had a net gain of 84 that year. And then following that year, 2018 and 19, we had 277 new hires. We had a little bit more attrition, 287. So we had net loss of 10 employees. But if you were to combine both years, we had total net gain of 74 civilian personnel. Fiscal year 2019-20, the current fiscal year, we are planning to hire 325 civilians, and we are anticipating to have 247 to be attritioned, and we believe we could end with 78 net gain, which is a good size. That is projected based on our next 4 months of prognosis, because we don't know how well the attrition will occur, but it's just guesstimated that we will have 78 net gain, provided the budget maintains its cadency and attrition stays the same. And the next question was, in this case, how many, I believe, let me look at the question. How many officers have been reassigned for civilian duties to patrol? As part of the overall strategic move the last several years, we had done several major things that helped the department to not only add more civilians into our ranks, but also strategically place the civilian employees in positions where it enabled formerly police officers doing the administrative or non-sworn duties in the department. So, for example, I'll just give you some example of what we've done. We added in 1920, we believe we'll have 478 PSRs deployed, which helps us to cut down on a vacancy on the PSRs to 46. We'll end the year with 46 vacancies. On the detention officers, we filled 287 detention officers. We're authorized to have 312. We're planning to open the Harbor Jail, and we're projected to fill 301 positions. So these are good gains that we accomplished. And for the security officers, as of a few days ago, we had 93. We are planning to end the year with 94. And as for the property officers, we have 70 property officers. We're authorized to have 80. We're planning to end with 72. So we'll have 8 vacancies. In addition to that process, what we had done over the last couple years, we were able to internally manage attrition in the department, as you have heard before, where we were able to move more than a couple hundred police officers from their past positions into field operations, and that was possible because we were able to hire the additional civilian personnel to properly position them in the areas where it augmented the void when we took the officers and positioned them in the field operations. On the final question, recommended police policies and actions that we would need in order to do better in civilian hiring and overall human capital management in police department. The first recommendation is to hire 2 senior administrative clerks, which will help us in background investigation administrative work. And the second priority would be to allow us to hire part-time background investigators so we could use them as needed in order to level our peaks and valleys when it comes down to doing background investigation. And normally in civilian hiring in Los Angeles Police Department, the most tedious and time-consuming process is the background investigation, and that's our Achilles heel. While we can do some other strategic or tactical maneuvers to enhance our pace of hiring, background investigation becomes the most difficult process for us. So these two requests would be greatly appreciated if it's allowed. We could actually augment some of the other projects and have these requests fulfilled. The final component is overall technology enhancement. As you know, most of the work in the city probably, but also not much different in Los Angeles Police Department, most of the work is done manually. There are very few large database systems that we use, such as Pacer or CRIS database, but they're very obsolete systems. Most of the work and most of the data keeping that happens in the department is done through personally fixed spreadsheets or Microsoft Access databases. That is very fractured and defragmented way of managing our 13,000 employees' resources. So with your approval, the last fiscal year, or actually I should say this fiscal year, we were able to actually hire a vendor to add a CRM system, which is Customer Relationship Management System. This system is based on Microsoft Dynamics 365, which actually automated onboarding our personnel to LAPD. We have digitized entire academy process. We have digitized probationary officer management process, and then we have also digitized record keeping for our personnel, and more importantly, the transfer request process, because I don't believe there is any organization that I know of that rotates their entire workforce. 1/3 of their workforce gets rotated on annual basis. This includes the attrition and hiring, but also in our department, there are mandatory rotations that occur, and it's tedious work. It consumes thousands of labor hours that everything is done manually. With this new advanced technology, we're going to digitize all these processes. We're hopeful to launch the system in 4 or 5 weeks. We've been working on it very diligently. And more importantly, what we're asking is another $612,000 to finish adding up more modules into this existing system that we built, which will automate the rest of the tedious and manual managed processes, such as we have processes internally that we manage injured on duty processes, return to work process, or even emergency deployment processes in our department. It's all done by spreadsheets.
So Vartan, just to clarify for me, so you said on the civilian personnel hiring, you're also integrating, for example, the same tool that you're using for CRM. You're using it for the civilian personnel as well?
Correct. In a way, what we're doing internally, LAPD is using the CRM to replace existing system that we have, and then consolidate all the spreadsheets that we use to manage our business into one CRM. But at the same time, our sister department in personnel department, the public safety side, has also embraced the CRM program to utilize that program to do the candidate management.
Right.
So we could hire them into our department, and they land in academy. So it's the same continuation of that. But also they're using the same technology to introduce a online multiple choice test for our new candidates and applicants, I should say. And then also they're planning to automate the background investigation component, that very component that I talked about earlier, that it's so tedious and it takes so many resources and days to complete. So our sister department will automate that. They're working on it. As soon as they're done, then what we will do is use the same format and migrate it into LAPD, so where we could also use the same tools to automate our processes.
Okay, great. Colleagues, were there any questions? David?
Madam Chair, so are you going to continue this in committee, or is that the plan, or are we
We're going to adopt a motion and then have a report back, but what?
Okay, no,
What was your-
because yes, because I did have a couple of questions and maybe add a few more. The hiring process. Wait, so you're requesting that that you have additional budget line item for administrative clerks and investigators, but you already have money for technology, or you need money for technology too?
We already got the money for the technology for this fiscal year.
Right.
We have enough funding to complete the project. But during the project, we identified 7 other, or I believe 6 other areas that we could also automate.
Oh.
As we were learning and working with the consultant to identify weak points and shortcomings that we have had for so many years in certain areas, above and beyond what we were prepared to do this fiscal year, we identified those, and we're asking for $612,000 to complete that. It's a one-time cost. For the annual maintenance, I think it's about $100,000 thereafter.
So you're going to be requesting this at your next budget cycle, budget request?
I have turned in the budget request. I don't know where it'll end up,
Right. But you requested it for both the administrative clerks, investigators, and the additional $612,000.
Yes.
Okay, great. And if you did get all these 3 things, how much faster will the hiring process be?
So not only faster, I think we believe the labor hour requirements will definitely improve, and the speed of hiring will increase, or I should say we will be able to cut down the duration or the time that it takes to hire personnel. We believe we could have about 1/3 improvement.
1/3 improvement.
1/3
okay.
improvement.
And last question: your hiring process. Are you independent from the personnel department, or are you within the personnel department?
I am from Los Angeles Police Department.
So you guys hire separately.
Well, we hire together. We personnel department de facto is the department that leads all the hiring processes. We work with personnel department together in sworn and civilian hiring process.
Okay. And I guess the report back, they're going to write all those numbers. I was trying to write down frantically, so it'll be great to have that report.
Okay.
And so I have one quick question, Vartan, and I'd like it included in the report, what our current status is for the crime lab personnel that supports the rape kit investigations and DNA analysis. So if we can make sure that that's also included in the report. So colleagues, I'd like to recommend that we adopt the motion and request for the report to also include, as I mentioned, the status of the crime lab personnel that supports the rape kit investigations DNA as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So colleagues, I'm going to go ahead and close our regular agenda and go into our special. Yes, sir.
We still have item 9.
We'll come back to the regular meeting. We just want to go into the special.
Okay,
Okay?
sure.
So we're going ahead and open the special Public Safety Committee meeting for Wednesday, February 26th, and this is the special agenda items. Item number 1, right. So if we can call item number 1, please. Do we have speakers?
Item number 1, verbal report by the Emergency Management Department and any other relevant departments on the city's emergency plans and protocols for dealing with the coronavirus.
Okay. So get our guests from EMD in the county. Thank you. So colleagues, let me just, before we have you all introduce yourselves, and thank you for joining us on such an abbreviated notice. But colleagues, as we all very well know, yesterday the Center for Disease Control warned Americans of a likely outbreak of the coronavirus, given the rising cases in Europe and the Middle East and Asia. And just today we had Orange County that declared a local emergency aimed at preparing the county for the potential of an outbreak. The move was similarly followed by the county of San Francisco and San Diego and Santa Clara. So as of yesterday, my understanding is that we have 60 confirmed cases of coronavirus in the United States and 15 confirmed cases here in California. The global picture is changing very rapidly, and I think it's one that requires us to do our due diligence as a city and as a county to make sure that we're prepared for the potential of a pandemic. And so with that, I want to thank you all for joining us here this afternoon so that we can ascertain what is the current status, what we're looking at, and how we are prepared as a city, and what we need to do to continue to prepare. So I want to thank, we invited our city emergency management department, fire, police, and the county department of public health to provide us a verbal report today. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, I missed most of it because I'm on the phone regarding the same topic. Phone hasn't stopped ringing. But I'm assuming that you're asking for an update of the situation.
I just wanted to introduce everyone, and then if you could give us kind of an update as to where we are at this moment in time.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Aram Sahakian, General Manager, Emergency Management Department, County Health. Please state your name.
My name is Prabhu Gounder. I'm a physician with the LA County Department of Public Health. I'm the medical director of the Respiratory Diseases Unit, and I'm part of the team that's leading the local response to coronavirus.
I'm Arthur Manukian. I'm a managing physician, Medical Services Division, City of Los Angeles Personnel Department.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Freeman, Assistant General Manager for the Emergency Management Department. I'm glad to have Joanne here.
Good afternoon. I'm Joanne O'Brien. I'm Medical Services Administrator with Personnel.
Thank you. So
We'll start with a briefing by County Health.
that would be terrific. Thank you.
Great. So good afternoon. I want to begin by providing an update on COVID-19 globally and in LA County. The disease caused by a new coronavirus that was first identified in Wuhan, China in December 2019 has been named COVID-19. Symptoms of this disease range from mild respiratory illness to severe disease that can cause hospitalization and death. Globally, there are now over 81,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases. The majority of these cases have been reported from China. The number of new cases being reported from China is declining, but more cases are being reported in other parts of the world. As a result, for the first time since the beginning of this outbreak, more cases are now being reported from other parts of the world than within China. South Korea has been upgraded to a level 3 travel advisory along with China, which means CDC recommends avoiding non-essential travel to those countries. Iran, Italy, and Japan have a level 2 travel advisory, and this means that these countries have evidence of community transmission. Older adults and people with certain chronic medical conditions are advised to avoid non-essential travel to these countries. There have been 14 confirmed cases in the United States, including one in LA County. The person in LA County has resolved the infection and is no longer under isolation. In addition, there are 45 confirmed cases among people who've been repatriated to the United States, including 3 people from Wuhan and 42 people from the Diamond Princess cruise line. Although the current risk for LA County residents of getting COVID-19 infection is extremely low, the LA County Department of Public Health is concerned about the potential for travel-associated introduction and subsequent community transmission in LA County. In response to this outbreak, the Department of Public Health is taking several steps to identify and contain the infection in LA County. First, we regularly review and update the CDC and state guidance to help implement those recommendations locally. We're working with CDC and LAX to identify return travelers from China and monitor those travelers to make sure that they don't develop symptoms of illness. We're working to communicate with the public about the latest COVID-19 situation on our website, including FAQs in multiple languages, and providing guidance to schools, employers, and other health professionals. We're providing consultation to healthcare providers in our community about COVID-19 diagnosis and management, and we work to coordinate testing of suspected patients. If indicated, we will facilitate testing for patients who meet our criteria through CDC. We're also hosting weekly webinars for various constituencies, including elected officials, city managers, healthcare providers, schools, colleges, universities, and others. Again, I want to emphasize that the current risk to LA County residents for getting COVID-19 is very low. The best thing people can do to protect themselves from any respiratory virus, including COVID-19, are the simple everyday preventive measures, such as washing hands, covering your cough, and avoiding going out in public when you're sick. In addition, influenza activity is still very high, and we want to encourage everyone to get the flu vaccine if they haven't done so already. We've also been getting a lot of questions about the usefulness and effectiveness of face masks for protecting against respiratory viruses. So I want to specifically state that face masks have not been shown to be helpful for the general public, for people who are otherwise well. Therefore, CDC does not recommend well people use face masks to prevent getting infected. I want to discourage face mask use in non-healthcare settings because there is a concern for potential shortages if the outbreak gets worse in LA. So we want to minimize inappropriate use of that important protective equipment. Again, thank you for the opportunity to provide this update, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Do you want to, Aram,
So which one is it? Should we get concerned or not, right? You
Right.
hear that, it's not as serious, it shouldn't be as serious, the influenza B, it's even more serious, but then, you listen to the CDC, they just finished a press conference, a live press conference at 3 o'clock. You hear San Francisco activating their emergency operations center, declaring an emergency. Orange County is doing the same this afternoon. So, and it's all in precaution. And it's in precaution to ensure that we are ready in case it gets out of control. And I think it's the responsible thing to do. We are doing the same thing. Public health is the lead on this. It's under the county, and they're the lead on this. But what San Francisco is doing now, we've been discussing and doing for the last 3-4 weeks. In other words, we are reaching out to our departments to ensure that they have a continuity of operations plan in place for this kind of an emergency, for a pandemic-related emergency, to identify their critical functions, to identify and come up with a plan, work-from-home plan for their non-essential functions, if it comes down to that. We're looking at our Emergency Operations Center activation and its objectives, operational and management objectives, which will be coordinating and supporting all first responder agencies in case we get it and it becomes a pandemic within the city boundaries. Our critical messaging, it mirrors the county public health messaging. We're educating the public. The mask issue, for example, is one thing that we've been talking about. Our mass notification system is ready to go if in case we need it. So we're all out. The full council will be receiving a briefing, to my knowledge, from Dr. Ferrer. It's a more detailed briefing that you will receive. We are embedded at the Los Angeles World Airports. They have their Department of Operations Center. They had it activated. We had people on the ground there. CDC's there. We keep monitoring. I just want to assure you that we are doing everything we are capable of doing to ensure that we're ready. And having said that, true, there's no need and there's no reason to panic at this time locally. There's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of issues that we're seeing. There's absolutely no reason for that at this time.
So, Aram, if you could just help me understand, I'm very familiar with our standard operating procedures as it relates to some of our major emergencies, whether, fires, for example. What is the standard operating procedure as it relates to, a circumstance where this becomes a prevalent issue here in the city of Los Angeles?
If it becomes an issue within the city boundaries, we will activate the EOC. It will most probably be a level 2 activation, and we'll be ready to step it up to the highest level 1 activation. We are and will be working with medical services right now.
Could you explain the difference for
level
folks?
2 and
Right.
level 1 is all out, and God forbid we see it in our lifetime. I hope we never see it. It's only an exercise. It's basically a major catastrophic disaster. That's your 7.8 earthquake. That's when you have a pandemic that is out of control, that we don't have a handle on it. So, and it's mass coordination. All the city agencies, departments are involved. There's coordination through the Office of Emergency Management, the county, the state, through an EMAC, through a mutual aid, assistance from other states. It's all out. Level 2 is a modified. There's 3 levels, by the way. Level 3 is duty team activation. EMD has a duty team of 4+1, 24 hours a day, and we deal with any issues citywide. Does not bring in other city agencies to the table because we coordinate via phone with their emergency management coordinators, and that suffice. Level 2 activation is a modified level 3 activation. It would be an incident not as catastrophic. It could be a gas leak. It could be a major event such as the Marathon Plus, where there's a large gathering. We were contemplating a level 2 for the Kobe Bryant Memorial, for example. So we're ready to ramp up to level 1 in case there's an incident. And level 1 is the highest level activation.
Okay.
I hope that explains.
It does.
I don't want to get too technical, but I hope that explains.
No, but I think it's good for folks that are interested in knowing the difference between them all.
Absolutely. So we will be meeting immediately this week and coming next week with the critical departments that will have some type of a role in a pandemic situation. And we will identify those functions and their seat at the Emergency Operations Center in case we activate. We're also looking at an activation of an 8 to 6 p.m. type of an activation where we will bring in the critical agencies in the planning process. In other words, there's planning to do right now. We don't want to sit and wait. It's going to take some resources through, and it's going to have an impact on departments, but we need to do it now. So we're ready when it comes to us. So that's a modified activation. We might do it. We're brainstorming right now with the other department if we need to activate the EOC for that, or the planning could be done outside the EOC. And medical services, so one concern that we always face is the safety of city employees, the safety of our first responders, police and fire when they're out there. This was an issue with the typhus outbreak, I believe. Vaccination was a concern. So I'm going to let our medical services touch on that.
Do you have any questions I can answer? Otherwise, I'll give you the facts and the speculations.
That'd be great.
Any questions?
No, you can go ahead and just provide
So as we know, the virus for coronavirus has been around for a long time. It's nothing new. This is a new subtype of coronavirus. That's why it's called novel coronavirus. The natural host of the coronavirus used to be animals, and apparently in China, at some point, just like SARS virus, like MERS virus, the virus so-called jumped from their natural habitat, from the animal to the human, to the new host. During that jump, what scientists usually think at this time, that during the jump, virus evolved, acquired more, so to speak, more aggressiveness and more resilience or resistance. And it's still probably mutating. That's why it's evolving, and that's why there is no immediate hope for the vaccine in the nearest future. Not to scare people, but those are the facts. And we cannot explain why. I talked to my friends and colleagues at USC. We don't know why there's a cluster of infection, for example, in Italy, 283 cases. They still cannot find the patient 0, the source. That's another fact. And please make note that apparently you can be, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can be a carrier for the novel virus, coronavirus, and be completely asymptomatic. And that's why few people on the cruise ship, they were carriers for the novel coronavirus, but they were completely asymptomatic. So that's why CDC, I think, issued those warning that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it's going to hit the United States. We get a lot of phone calls from the departments concerning that people coming back from China or from other parts of the world, and their coworkers or colleagues are concerned if those people are coming back to work. Our answer to that at this time, if they were screened at the airport in the LAX and they were allowed to go back into the country with or without the quarantine, there is not that much we can do with our capacity to rescreen them if they're, again, asymptomatic and they were vetted to go into the country. We advise departments that if someone appears to be acutely sick, and whether it's potentially can be coronavirus, I don't think at this time, but it's a flu, upper respiratory infection, common cold, all those are the completely different viruses. Virus of flu is different, virus of common cold with sneezing and runny nose is completely different. Those people should stay at home, and their supervisor should advise them for all intents and purposes they should stay at home, not to infect people at work. That's our current advisement to the city departments.
Could you advise us again, or just remind us, maybe, Doctor, what's the incubation period based on
commonly known? It's 14 days, but there is a study that came out in England. Now there are conversations that it can be up to 27 days. It's a one study. I don't know if it's not widely accepted fact, but there are some reports. Because the virus, we think that it's evolving, it's adapting, just like, I'll give you an example, just like a flu virus. Each year it's a different virus. That's why each year they make a vaccine for that specific subtype of the same, not the same, but of the flu virus family, but different species of that flu virus. So most likely coronavirus also evolves, gets more resistance, more virulence, and that's why maybe incubation used to be 14 period. Now we'll see if it goes to up to 27. But the common knowledge at this time and the common quarantine is 14 days.
So of the case that was the single case that was mentioned in LA County that was discovered, that now that person is clear, correct? How long of what was involved in that process to finally get them back into good health?
I think, go ahead.
Sure. So the one case that we had, and just to talk about the incubation period a little bit more, because it is an important question for public health control, how long someone's infectious and whether someone's infectious before they develop symptoms. A lot of these studies, what they do, and what we did for this patient in LA County, is we do serial tests. So we put a swab to the back of the nose, we send it to CDC, they test, and then they tell us if there's virus or not. The test that's done can't distinguish a live virus from non-viable virus. So what we know is that virus in this patient was detected for at least 21 days from symptom onset. But what we don't know is whether that was a viable virus, meaning it can take some time just to clear the debris in your throat. And so just because you detect it doesn't necessarily mean the person is infectious. So this person was, we did detect virus for at least 21 days after symptom onset. But it's out of an abundance of precaution that we isolate anyone with any evidence of virus until they're completely clear, because we don't know for sure that it's not infectious.
And so what is the process involved? Is it just a waiting it out period, like a traditional flu-like symptom? What's the process?
So for a confirmed case, and we've only had one confirmed case here, but
right.
This is the CDC protocol for any confirmed case, is for that person to stay confined until they are free of virus, because we don't know that they won't be infectious. In LA County, we've taken the approach that we want that person confined in a healthcare setting, just because, again, so much is unknown about this virus, about its potential to spread. I know that in other jurisdictions, people have felt comfortable with these people going home and self-isolating at home, but in LA County right now, our policy, as long as we still have these single cases where we still have the resources to try to contain it, is to be very aggressive and make sure that we can put them into the best isolation we can.
And so there's oversight provided because of the respiratory nature of the illness.
Yes, so they go to a hospital that has expertise in managing people with novel infections. They use their recommended infection control procedures, so everyone that goes in has full gown, mask, everything that's needed to make sure that they're not exposing themselves. Again, it's just out of an abundance of precaution because, again, we don't know exactly how it's transmitted, and that those isolation procedures are continued until we can reassure ourselves that the person has no virus.
Okay.
One clarification, doctor. But we do have instances where U.S. citizens arrived from mainland China and they self-quarantined themselves, correct? They were asymptomatic. I just want to confirm that because now I'm a little confused.
So yes, there's two types of monitoring that we do. One is the active monitoring. These are people at very high risk. They have high risk exposures. So anyone on the Diamond Princess cruise, anyone that's a contact or confirmed case, CDC tells us about these people. We check in with them every day to make sure that they're not having symptoms. If they have symptoms, then we will assess what those symptoms are. If those symptoms are compatible with the coronavirus infection, then we'll arrange for testing. We'll isolate them in a hospital. The vast majority of contacts we're following now are people who return travelers from China. So the CDC guidance was for anyone that returned from China within 14 days, they need to self-monitor themselves for symptoms. In LA County, we've taken a more proactive approach. Instead of just giving guidance to people that they self-isolate or that they self-monitor and call their provider or call public health if they have symptoms, we've taken a more proactive approach where we actually try to reach out to them, make sure that we have a valid phone number. We provide some guidance on what symptoms to look out for. We give them a specific number to call if they develop symptoms. Depending on when we contact them, we try to make a second attempt between 5 and 14 days, and we contact them again at the end of 14 days. So far, we received about 3,000 return travelers. We've made contact with about 75% of them. We're still following about 1,000 return travelers at this time. So we track all of our contacts for symptoms. In LA County, we haven't had any one of those travelers who developed symptoms and required testing. The issue of asymptomatic infections is a difficult one because they're asymptomatic, you would not know to test them.
Know.
The few asymptomatic ones that we know about are those from the Diamond Princess cruise. They were all offered the opportunity for testing. Most of them took the offer, and there are a number of people who are asymptomatic who are now testing positive for the virus. So that's where our concern for asymptomatic transmission comes from.
So of all these being tested, are they all verified by the CDC that they are in fact? So the CDC is confirming all of those cases, so 100% of the tests are being conducted?
Yeah, so that's one of the challenges as well is CDC is the only place where we can get testing done in the U.S. A couple weeks ago, you may have heard that CDC distributed test kits to all the local health departments. There was a problem with that kit, and so we're still waiting for new kits to be distributed. But that really limits our ability to identify and contain cases, especially if we're thinking that there could be asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic cases. Right now, the CDC criteria only allow us to test people with severe illness from China, and less severe illness from Hubei province, and less severe illness if you're a confirmed contact. But the majority of people we're monitoring are return travelers from China, and if we're only testing severe people because that's what the CDC capacity is, until we get the local testing capacity, there's a possibility that there will be someone with milder symptoms that don't meet CDC testing criteria that could be infectious, and that's really our concern, and that's what a lot of what the preparation is for, is to prevent or to be able to detect and respond to potential community transmission from introduction from a return traveler who we are currently not testing.
So is it customary that that's the protocol, is that the CDC is the kind of foremost authority to do this testing, or is it customary that they provide the local kits that enable our counties to basically be an extension?
So initially, CDC takes the lead in developing these test kits because they also have to work with other regulatory agencies like the FDA. So any diagnostic test that's going to be used for humans for clinical diagnosis needs to be FDA approved. So CDC has those relationships with the FDA. So the FDA issues what's called an emergency use authorization. This EUA authorization is developed in conjunction with CDC. CDC also has the technical expertise to rapidly develop these tests. So because they take the lead, they usually end up being the first and only place where we can do this type of testing, both because they have the expertise and the relationship with the FDA to get the approval to use that test in humans. In this situation, I don't fully understand what the error was, but this type of delay is not typical. And so we're hoping that within the next week or so, we will be able to get the test locally.
Can't be surprised. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, did you have, Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this report. In relation, since we're stuck right now with CDC only doing the testing, how long does it take to get the results back once a swab is done?
So it's getting better. About 2 weeks ago, we were waiting about 5 to 7 days to get test results back. And during that time, everyone that we tested, we treated them as potentially infectious because we don't know. So we treated them like a case. We would encourage home isolation. We were following their household members. So we were basically treating them like a case. Nowadays, I think it's down closer to 2 to 4 days. CDC has heard the concerns, and they've ramped up their own lab testing capability. The timeline that I keep hearing is in the next week we should get the tests distributed locally. So hopefully next week we'll be able to get that the test available. The one other thing that's changing now too is we expect CDC to expand their criteria for who they will allow testing. So right now the criteria were based on the situation last week, which is where 99% of cases were in China. We didn't have widespread transmission in all these other countries. So in recognition of the fact that we can have travelers from other parts of the world with infection, they're also going to expand their testing criteria. So we should be able to test more than we are now.
And that criteria may include all the major hospitals?
So the criteria actually are based on exposure, so your likelihood of having the virus. So it's I can't speak for CDC, but as an example what they may consider, right now they're only testing people with who return travelers from China within 14 days who develop a severe respiratory illness requiring hospitalization. They could consider expanding that to any country on a level with a level 2 or level 3 travel advisory, for example.
Okay. So in terms of preparation for the effect of a potential outbreak, what populations have you identified as being the most vulnerable?
So our concern right now would be, again, based on the situation a week ago, and this is changing every week, given that 99% of cases were occurring in China, we were concerned that if we were going to have introduction into LA County, it's going to be in parts of LA County where there are large Chinese American populations and where there's a large volume of travel between China and LA County.
Age group wise, kids are susceptible, and older individuals, especially with other comorbidities.
Mm-hmm. So people with compromised immune systems.
Correct.
Young people and
young undeveloped immune system response, and older people with either just normal aging immunity is not as robust, and or if they have other comorbidities like diabetes, cancer, things like that, they're more susceptible, because the lethality, so to speak, of the virus is only 2%. 83% recover, and they develop light or mild respiratory illness. Around 13% is moderate respiratory illness. They still recover, and only 2% is the mortality.
So if there is an outbreak and it leaves this population that it has typically affected thus far,
sure,
and you see this grouping of folks who come down with flu-like symptoms, and the CDC steps in and identifies that there is an outbreak of a population that hasn't traditionally experienced it, then at that point, that brings into question other vulnerable populations, for example, homeless individuals, right?
Yes, homeless individuals usually it's underserved population, so they de facto or they will have other comorbidities.
Are there protocols developed yet for hospitals that intake folks experiencing flu-like symptoms in terms of what to watch out for, higher incidences, or say there is a proliferation of lots of people outside of the norm coming in for upper respiratory illness treatment?
As you remember, in the past they used to have tents. They built like tents around the hospital, and it all comes to the triage system. you're going to have, or we're going to have, most likely is anticipated that it's going to be shortage of medical professionals because it's all going to come to the triage. You have mass influx of sick people. You don't know what it is, so you're going to need a medical professional who's going to triage their symptoms based on the severity, and it's going to identify which person is at higher risk because of the travel, because of the contact with other sick people who had traveled. So all these questions are going to be asked. That's well-developed medical triage protocol that I'm sure every hospital has by now.
And that would be enacted
From the past experience.
Of course, if there was some sort of sudden, unexpected outbreak of something, that would probably be triggered.
Correct.
I've done a lot of research as well, just as an amateur. But I understand that the spike proteins have been identified that could lead to a vaccine. Where is all of that?
I don't know. All I know that the vaccine is not in the nearest future.
I've just heard different things about that. That if they've mapped out the whole
protein system. Genomes. China identified it first within 2 weeks, and they published it. The genomic imprint of the virus. But I think the virus evolves, and that's maybe the difficulty that it creates to develop the vaccine.
I'm just wondering if we expect perhaps that, just like every flu season, the flu also mutates.
Yes.
And then a different vaccine is crafted every year.
Right, but let's not forget
the popular strain. And I was just wondering if perhaps ideally we could get to a similar situation with the coronavirus.
Yes, that would be the hope, but let's not forget for the flu shot, for the flu vaccine during the high season, it takes them 8 to 9 months to develop that specific one.
Right. Of course, we shouldn't bank on, a vaccine is around the corner, but right. I'm just as part of the conversation.
That's the same technique,
it's good to have a sense,
same approach. Yes.
It's good for us to have a sense of where we are with real prevention and or various treatments. And if the coronavirus victims, if it's very similar to the flu, some folks in isolation may think that they're just really sick and they get over it and they never know.
Right.
So,
But coronavirus, we do not know how it affects the lung tissue. The mechanism of the attack is not well known yet. We know it attacks the lung and you die from respiratory failure. But how it does it at the molecular level, how it attacks it, how it so virulent, we still don't know on a microscopic level.
And that's my last question, and I'll yield the floor. But in terms of those who have recovered, do we have a sense of what the long-term implications of having had the virus are? For example, do we know yet? Do the lungs fully recover? Is there some sort of lung damage, if you will, or do we have any of that information yet?
No.
Okay.
No. But I know that people that recover so far, they don't have any sequelae. Mm-hmm. There are no consequences. If they recover, and 82%, do recover, and there is no sequelae on the lung tissue. They do not require oxygen. The question that we also should ask whether they develop some kind of an immunity, but I don't know.
Yet to be seen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Gupel, you're from Public Health, Department of Public Health in LA County?
Gounder, yes.
Great. I'm sorry.
Gounder, Gounder.
Gounder?
Gounder, yep.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Gounder. And to your right, are you from our city of LA?
That's correct.
And you are?
MANOUKIAN.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna be butchering both your names. I apologize. Manuka? Manukian. I'm a little alarmed because what you've said is a little not very assuring. So I just want to kind of clean it up because I think it's very important that how we disseminate information to the public. But first and foremost, and this might be a question for public health. So in a case like this, who declares an emergency? Is it the city or the county? Who has the jurisdiction or Aram? You could.
I think government.
It will be the county.
So it will be
yes. The first step, since public health is under the county, it will be county declaration, and then we'll follow suit. The state could declare an emergency right now, and that could be based on, Orange County's declaration or San Francisco's declaration. That hasn't happened yet. But the first step, if LA is declaring it, will be the county.
Right. And LA County has not declared an emergency.
No, not yet.
And I believe Orange County is more of a political reason why they declared a state of emergency, which is causing a little bit of hysteria, because I think they were trying to make a political statement not to have a certain area to open in Orange County. So I want to make that clear. And actually, Manukian, you said it earlier. I want you to elaborate on this point, and if Dr. Kaunda, that's close enough, if you could elaborate. I think you said when it comes to whether it's the coronavirus or any other kind of virus, 85% recover with 13% and only 2% fatality. Can you explain on the fact that, like most viruses, whether it's the flu virus or anything else,
is similar to the flu virus?
So even with no vaccination,
absolutely,
85 or
yes,
98% are going to recover.
Yes, when there was a flu virus, H1N1, the head of the infectious disease, I think Dr. Fauci, right? There was panic at that time also, and in his presentation he said the most susceptible people, should be extra cautious are pregnant women. Children, elderly people with other comorbidities. It's the same thing pertains to coronavirus, same thing pertains to flu virus.
So thank you. And also, basically, when you talked about those individuals who are most susceptible, whether it's younger adults or older adults, younger adults because they don't have any immunity built up yet, or vulnerable populations, that holds true not just for coronavirus.
That's for everyone. That's
for
correct.
Any kind of ailment or any kind of
Yes, it's the simple logic. With all these viruses, the main treatment is supportive care.
Right.
Unless there is a vaccine, there is no medication that we can give. Even for the flu shot, there is medication Tamiflu, but we only give if all it does, it shortens the duration if we give it for the first 2 days of the onset of the flu. That's the medication. But other than that, it's supportive care.
So both of you guys, either one of you, feel free to jump in anytime when you want as well.
Sure. Yeah. So what I can add is that this full spectrum of illness for this virus is not known. The series that Dr. Manukian is referring to is from China. It was published by the China CDC last week. They reviewed 72,000 reported cases, 44,000 confirmed cases. These are all hospitalized cases. And among hospitalized cases, 82% had mild illness, 2.3% died. The others had critical illness in between. But what we don't know is the true denominator. We don't know how many people had minimally symptomatic or asymptomatic disease that didn't present for care. So the true mortality rate could be lower than that 2.3%. What we know so far is that this virus seems to be less severe than SARS, but it seems to be more infectious than SARS, more similar to influenza. Typically with the coronaviruses, we haven't thought of those viruses as being transmissible before someone had symptoms. This is behaving more like influenza, where you do have transmission before symptoms are apparent. It seems to be much more transmissible by air. Influenza is a good model for us for several reasons, because we can't really count the total number of flu cases in a given year. What CDC does and what we do is modeling. We try to use available data to try to estimate the true burden of disease. And the other reason I think we look to influenza is, 2 years ago we had one of the most severe flu seasons. In that flu season, we had probably 30 million illnesses across the U.S. We had about 55,000 deaths. With 30 million illnesses, you can do the math, it's much less than 1%. With the coronavirus, with this new coronavirus, even if we're talking, 1%, even 0.5%, we're talking about an impact that's going to be several-fold higher than the most severe flu season we had in the last 10 years. So that's really the source of concern. I guess really to a question earlier about what we are doing, right now in public health, we are doing two things. We're focused on the current response right now, which is a strategy of containment, and so that focuses on case identification, monitoring, and symptom tracking. But we also have a planning group that's thinking ahead to this eventual possibility of introduction into the community, and they are thinking about those things like, the different scenarios that we can imagine. What would happen in schools? What would happen in homeless shelters? What would happen in skilled nursing facilities? There is a pandemic influenza plan that we are reviewing and updating for coronavirus, and addresses a lot of the things that we've talked about. What would we do at hospitals? How would we make sure that we can make up for healthcare personnel who may be ill and can't come to work? What do we do about shortages of supplies? What do we do if there's not enough ventilators? What do we do if not rooms?
Right.
So there's a lot that we're doing to plan ahead for this coronavirus if it is introduced and it spreads. And a lot of what we're doing is based on our pandemic influenza plan.
And that's what's important, that we are planning ahead, that we do have a plan. And we were preparing for the worst, but clearly, especially County Public Health Department is monitoring the situation, and if it warrants an emergency response or an emergency declaration, you will do that. And I want the public to be reassured, whether it's the coronavirus or any other kind of flu or influenza flu, like the last couple of years where we had severe flus, coronavirus is no different. I mean, you're still trying to find the cause and all the different symptoms or diagnoses of it, but it's no different than anything else. But it's always great to be prepared. And you also talked about local testing capacity. When will local testing capacity be brought up or up to par, and what can the city of LA do to help with that?
So CDC tells us that we should get the kits available in a week, but we also heard that last week, so I would say the timeline is uncertain for that. One of the things that I have seen is the Association of Public Health Laboratories, APHL. They did write a letter to CDC and possibly FDA asking for a relaxation of the criteria for tests that can be used in human populations. The methods are out there. Anyone can develop this test, and certain labs have. The problem is it's not FDA approved for human use. So if there continues to be a significant delay, I think you might see more and more people advocating for use of these non-FDA approved kits, which, again, may be more variable than an FDA approved kit, but it could be better than nothing.
Okay. And I know probably the Madam Chair is going to probably keep this open so you guys could come back and keep us more properly informed. But I just want to make sure, I wanted to make sure that we provide the proper information, because there are some xenophobia happening, and I don't want, and not just xenophobia, but any particular group or individual that are where people mistakenly think that they're more susceptible or to stay away from, and we just want to make sure, because I know you said they're only testing from people from mainland China, but as we've known, we have cases confirmed all throughout the world. So we want to make sure that this is not an opportunity for people to have hysteria, because we have professionals working on this.
Absolutely, we agree with that. That is absolutely a concern for us, both the equity of how we deliver our services and also avoiding stigma. So we're very careful about our messaging, and that's why in the revised the revised testing criteria, we would try to be as generic as possible, focusing on countries with a travel advisory as opposed to focusing on specific countries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rue. And just as it relates to the protocols in a declaration of what would be a declaration of emergency for the county, what would be the trigger for that?
That I am not comfortable speaking on, because I know there are discussions going on at higher levels about what that trigger would be, and I think it also relates to what we would expect in return for that declaration. So I know that it is being discussed. It has to be, since other cities and counties in California have. But I don't think I'm at a point where I can talk about those discussions.
And then also, what would be comparable to an incident that would be comparable to what we're talking about today? When was the last time the county made a declaration of a public health emergency such as this?
2 years ago for hepatitis A.
Okay.
We did a similar declaration, and that was actually, it wasn't a county declaration. It was actually, we had a county declaration as well as a California Department of Public Health declaration. And I think what it allowed us to do at that time was mobilize more resources to be able to respond. It was extraordinary because we had the potential for transmission in people that were not part of the communities that we were used to. The typical hepatitis A outbreaks before were in people who were household contacts. You know where they live, you can reach out to them, you can make sure they get vaccinated. With that outbreak, we weren't able to identify those type of transmission networks, so we had to do extraordinary things such as going to a general community and trying to vaccinate as many people as we can, try to message to restaurants, try to clean streets. All of that would not have been possible without that declaration of the additional resources that came with it. Same thing with the California Department of Public Health. They're able to, at that time, there was a shortage of hepatitis A vaccine. We would not have been able to get this additional vaccine for the response without that public health declaration and the vaccine from CDPH.
And to be clear, and that this is the part I want to underscore, because the declaration is related to availing additional resources for support of mitigating these concerns. So, and because I want to make sure that the public understands what that means when there's a public declaration of emergency, so that they understand what the additional resources that come with that.
Absolutely. It is not tied to we need to have a certain number of cases to declare an emergency. No. If the core group preparing for this incident feels and see the need for additional resources and additional multi-agency coordination, they can pull the trigger on it. It doesn't mean it's out of control. It doesn't mean we're in a panic factor. No.
Right. Thank you very much. And just in terms of our first responders and what their exposure is given the circumstances, Doctor, if we're able to, if you can just report on our fire personnel and what their response is, given that we know that the potential with some of the vulnerable community, I know with, for example, if we even look at the FRVs and their exposure on an ongoing basis, what protective gear or things that might be used to help mitigate their risk and exposure to this potentially?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Mark Eckstein, EMS Commander and Medical Director of Los Angeles Fire Department. Obviously, member safety amongst the firefighters and the paramedics are of utmost concern. They need to be safe in order to protect the public. So we've done a number of things to maximize their safety and then provide for public safety. We changed our dispatch system, so when someone calls 911 and our call takers field the call, if the patient has symptoms where they're sick with flu-like symptoms or they complain of any shortness of breath, the call taker ascertains if the caller has been to mainland China in the last 14 days or has had any contact with a known or suspected coronavirus patient. If the answer is to the affirmative of either of those questions, the call taker puts down in the comments to responding resources that it's a suspected coronavirus patient, and our members are to don proper protective personal equipment. We also have a verbal warning by our dispatchers on the radio, so our members are aware responding to the incidents. Every apparatus in the city, every fire apparatus in the city, we have protective equipment for coronavirus and similar type infectious diseases, which basically consists of eye protection, an N95 or P100 mask, disposable gloves, and a disposable gown and a communicable disease kit. All our members have been trained on that. As alluded to in some of the previous questions, this is very, very similar to what we've done with bird flu, Ebola, SARS, you name it. These different type of infectious diseases arise periodically. It's the same approach. I think the comments of my colleagues here are very, very much on target. I think there has to be a matter of perspective. This has been probably a moderate to severe flu season already. The estimates are about 1,000 children have died in this country, and probably 25,000 Americans have died already from influenza. And to the best of our knowledge, there's been no deaths of anyone in the United States from coronavirus, only about 60 confirmed cases. So obviously that can change, but basic preventive measures is always first and foremost in terms of getting vaccinations and just using common sense in terms of infectious droplet precautions and so forth. So we've communicated to the field so they have situational awareness as best as possible. And again, beyond that, also, if we encounter a person who we suspect might be infected with COVID-19, our members don proper PPE. We also dispatch an EMS supervisor for on-scene supervision to make sure protective equipment is properly donned, and we notify the receiving hospital in advance so the healthcare professionals in the emergency department can prepare and also minimize exposure to other patients in that emergency department.
Terrific. Thank you all very much. Well, I think we'll go ahead and just hold this item in committee so that should we want to revisit the conversation at a later date. But I want to thank you all very much. It was very insightful, very helpful for us, and we look forward to our continued communications on this, and hopefully we're prepared for something that won't be an issue for us going forward. So my thanks to you all. Thank you very much.
Let's hope for the best and get ready for the worst.
Right, correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so that'll bring us to item number 2 on the special agenda.
Item number 2, Emergency Management Department report relative to the purchase of 2 rapid response
Perfect, you didn't
vehicles
have-
by the EMD.
Assistant General Manager with the Emergency Management Department. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have about this purchase, but just some general information. We have a pre-identified funding source, City's Emergency Operations Fund, and the request was approved by Chief Mike Moore, who's chair of our Emergency Operations Board, and at the direction of the CAO's office, we prepared the report so that there would be council oversight of this expenditure. The purpose of the vehicles is for our duty officer and duty teams that you're learning more about, that respond to command posts, that respond to planned events, that have, it's a very dynamic role that we have as an agency representative or liaison officer and part of the command structure at the field level. At present, we're reliant on GSD fleet vehicles for that purpose, which poses a lot of problems for access and doesn't have the right equipment or reliability. So we're asking to spend available money on 2 vehicles so that we can do a better job of responding to the field.
Great. And just the only question I had was who would be responsible for the ongoing maintenance and service of the vehicles?
General Services, Fleet Services.
General Services, okay.
So we are getting the money back from the feds.
Oh.
Yes, it's the Emergency Management Performance Grant that we've included this for. We get about $600,000 a year, so it's cost neutral to the city.
Great. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and make a recommendation that we authorize the general manager of the Emergency Management Department to expend $123,220 from Fund number 392, the Emergency Operations Fund, for the purchase of 2 rapid response vehicles for the department. Seeing no objection, that'll be the order. Thank you very much. Did we have any? So. Okay, so we have for public. For what? So I'm sorry, Antonia and Arnold Sachs, my apologies. We didn't realize you had a card. It didn't show up.
Thank you very much. First, how did they get the name coronavirus, since it doesn't sound Chinese? Second, we need to hone in on the Chinese scientists, not all are unethical, to set up a database of foreign scientists engineering vaccines. Third, I'm worried about any commercial military aviators and all our pilots. Are they being protected and safeguarded from these coronavirus transmissions and exposures? Now, these highly immoral Chinese scientists engaged in nefarious and highly illegal biochemical hazardous viruses and cloning human beings without a soul in their dirty rogue laboratories, creating a lethal and highly contagious virus to help eliminate 1/3 of the global population, maybe starting in China, then India, then Africa, then Latin America. That is my concern about this situation, for we understand that there are no safeguards, no oversight, and no supervision of many of these scientists in China, where they are creating a slew of viruses and dispersing them throughout Asia and eventually the world. So we need to safeguard the American people by really just keeping an eye out there and watching what they're inventing or what they're creating, what they're engineering, and eventually it will harm the American people. Is this another form of World War III? I don't know. Is this to take down our grid? Is this to take down the American way of penetrating our American standards? I don't know. But we need to make sure that we will protect first and foremost the American people. I'm not saying attack them, violate them, discriminate them. No. We must not do that. We must help the Asian community. We must help their businesses, and we must encourage them. But it's not their fault. It might be another form of genocide, like the homeless population in America. It's another form of genocide, too. God bless Donald Trump and
Mr. Sachs?
Yes, thank you again, Arnold Sachs. I actually thought it was a very incisive report, and I was very impressed. I did hear some things about testing in several different countries, England and Korea and China, and I heard Center of Disease Control. So we are working on a vaccine. There's a vaccine being prepared. I heard public health is involved. Just to be on the other side of this a little bit, I know we had an outbreak of hepatitis A that affected the homeless, because I heard the homeless was part of this population that could be exposed. I also know that there was an outbreak of the spice epidemic with bad drugs that affected the homeless population. So I'm wondering, just to be on the safe side here, is the Department of Public Health enrolling homeless people in the county's health care program? You know, they have a health care program, LA Care. They should be enrolling people into this so that in case something happens, they'll be able to be covered through the health care provided by the private insurer. The agencies that are doing research, they're sharing some of this research. I mean, I understand that the county is involved in some kind of bioscience research they're considering. They don't need to get involved in bioscience research at the county level, because the state, the federal government, these other countries are doing research on this type of disease, and hopefully they'll have an opportunity to share a antidote if it's necessary when it becomes available. I'm not sure. It's like the flu. If you get a shot, it could be worldwide. So I'm just wondering that hopefully that the county does not need to get involved in any kind of.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Thank you. So that concludes our special agenda, and we'll go back to resume on our regular agenda and take item number 9, please.
Item 9, Joint Chief Legislative Analyst and LAFD report relative to wildland-urban interface hazard mitigation.
Afternoon, Council members. Joshua Drake from the CLA's office.
And good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Kristen Crowley, Fire Marshal and Deputy Chief in charge of our Fire Prevention and Public Safety Bureau.
So before you use a joint CLA-LAFD report with input from a number of departments on the wildland-urban interface and departments' roles and responsibilities for dealing with a wildfire in this area. The report was submitted in response to a motion that was amended by this committee for us to report back on these issues. The report provides an overview of the roles that fire, police, emergency management, transportation, water and power, rec and parks, animal services, neighborhood empowerment, planning and building and safety departments have, and discusses various programs run by the city, such as brush fire clearance, red flag parking day restrictions, and then procedures departments have that they activate when needed during an event or before an event. Prior to this report coming out, the fire chief had organized a meeting with all these departments to discuss these issues, and each department's role and responsibility, and the fire department continues to work with various departments on these issues. Recently, the mayor's office established a task force to look at some of these things in a more in-depth manner, including some of the items that were mentioned in council members Bond and Corret's and Rue's letter to this committee. If you have any questions, there's representatives from the department here to answer them.
Thank you. So just with respect to the task force, what are the issues that are going to be prioritized and focused on?
Well, there's a pretty long laundry list of issues. So the main categories are just preparation and planning, notification and evacuation strategies, and then recovery and citizen empowerment. And so we're going to look at post-fire analysis from other jurisdictions, the very high fire hazard severity zones, how they're drawn, any updates that the state might have on those. The hillside communities and like ages of buildings there, general plans, things like that. And then we're also going to look at notification procedures, evacuation procedures, road and infrastructure upgrades are going to be looked at, digital notification, things like that. And then also working with neighborhood councils and looking at how citizen groups in other jurisdictions are engaged in the process.
Yeah, I know this is an issue that my office and we've been working on very closely, working with all the various agencies, animal services, and those that were cited in this motion, to actually course correct on our evacuation efforts. Having kind of been on the ground all 3 times in 2 years for the evacuation efforts in my district, I became very familiar with where the shortcomings were and where the opportunities for improvement. It's why I had been so diligent in leading some of the overhauls of those operating procedures and protocols for my district. Mr. Rue, I know you signed on to that letter, so I suspect you might have some questions for the group.
Well, no, I just wanted to, I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing this to the committee and taking lead on this issue and working. And I'm very thankful to the continued work on the Wildland Urban Interface Hazard Mitigation Task Force. It's a long name. And I really want to thank the mayor's office for taking lead and also trying to help intervene. And because this is very important, and many of us have already been working separately because of the various incidents that occurred in our district. And in my district alone, where I represent many of the hillsides, from Griffith Park all the way to the Hollywood Hills and Sherman Oaks, we've already started evacuation drills, voluntary evacuation drills, working with especially the fire department, and doing everything to update everything, but we need to do more. And that's what this is an attempt to do. I know you have a long list, and I know we're going to be convening more meetings, and it's an opportunity for, instead of us all just working in silos, for us to all come together as well. And whether it's fire, rain, or the inevitable earthquake, I think this is a very important endeavor for us to all take. And you went over the various subcommittees already, right? The major subcommittees, and do you know how often the group's going to meet, or if they're going to meet separately, or anything else like that?
There's going to be separate meetings. I'm not sure if they've set how often they're going to meet yet, but I'll get back to you with that information.
Yeah, no, and I know this is recently formed, so I look forward to the reports and recommendations that come out of those committees so that we can enact it here in council, because we want to make sure from the recent disasters, and primarily it's been fires, with a couple of mudslides and floods like in my district, but to learn from those examples what went right and what went wrong, so we can make sure those wrongs are turned to rights. So thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, I know we've covered a lot of these issues multiple times. I know I've done so separately with you all, and I want to thank everyone for their effort on addressing these issues. We know that this is becoming a more frequent exercise of these muscles every time we have another large-scale incident with requiring evacuations, and every area, given the topography, commands a very different and unique type of response given all of these issues. But I want to thank the department for all of the work that it's done to help us fine-tune this process. I know every time I'm at a command post, and when we're kind of wrapping up, I just said, well, I look forward to the post-mortem on this, and let's figure out what we can do better. And so there's always opportunity for us to refine and improve that processes. So I want to thank you all for that. So I'd like to go ahead and recommend that we note and file the joint CLA-LAFD report, direct the CLA and LAFD, and request the mayor's office to report in 60 days on the work of the mayor's Wildland Urban Interface Task Force, and direct the fire department and other relevant city departments to report with recommendations to strengthen the city's response to wildfires in the Wildland Urban Interface, ways to enhance coordination between the city departments and outside agencies, ways to increase resiliency and recovery efforts after a major fire as recommended by the Mayor's Wildland Urban Interface Task Force and outlined in the communication from Council Members Bonin, Koretz, and Rue to the Public Safety Committee. So, seeing no objection, that'll be the order. And thank you both very much. Thanks for hanging on with us today. Thank you. Then we just have two final public speakers, Mr. Sachs and Ms. Ramirez. Got 1 minute each.
Yes, thank you again, Arnold Sachs. This is the Public Safety Committee meeting. Doesn't feel very safe coming to City Hall anymore. You know, the rhetoric that has been dialed up the last few years is somewhat off the chart. The UN has visited the city regarding its homeless situation, and nothing has changed. There was Charlottesville, Virginia. There was Berkeley, California, where people were fighting. Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff both represent California. They must be aware of what's going on in Los Angeles with this. When you have a meeting and you have to discuss to the people that are attending, please excuse the language that's being used because it's a free speech issue. Hate speech is not a free speech issue. Everybody should be aware of that. They need to have the Justice Department of the country come in here and look at what the hell's going on in Los Angeles with this rhetoric that has blossomed because of the lack of...
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Ms. Ramirez?
God bless the freedom of speech. I've earned it. Los Angeles is at war. Los Angeles is a socialist communist democrat regime with its uncivilized, filthy savages in their established safe haven sanctuary city, which is now for our battleground. The law-abiding citizens are in full combat to remove the shackles of tyranny, oppression, repression, racist hate-mongering, mob lynchings, silencings, and censorship, violence, high crimes, drugs, opiates, child, human sex trafficking, pedophilia, runaway theft, poverty, homelessness, and the gang epidemic, Holocaust. We have no public safety because these Democrat politicians are too busy rewarding the criminal predator motherfuckers. And again, for those of us who are living out in the streets, especially at the Music Center Grand Park and La Placita, homeless women are under the gun by these goddamn criminal homeless assholes, the Skid Row niggers, the Latino gangbangers, and all the other criminals. They are robbing, attacking, and beating homeless women.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Your time is up. I believe we have cleared the desk.
We have cleared the desk.
Thank you. Our meeting is adjourned.